Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have Becca. She is a life and mindset coach. Welcome, Becca. I'm so excited for our conversation today. So, can you share a little bit about your journey exploring manifestation and how it's influenced your life?
Manifestation. So I started really realizing that thoughts and intentions create reality back in 2010. I enrolled in a wilderness skills program and I was camping outdoors 3 days a week. And there was a heavy Native American influence on the program. So there was a lot of gratitude and intention setting. And I just noticed being out in nature that much in a collective of people that were really in that mindset that prayers and intentions really unfolded. And I grew up in a very non-religious home. So there wasn't any emphasis on God or prayer. And setting intentions was kind of new for me. And call it beginner's luck or just true intention, but it was so intense and potent in my world that I couldn't not believe in something anymore. So that's really where it started. And let's see, it's 2024, so it's 14 years later. There's just been so many different experiences with it. I've tried out so many different avenues and strategies and techniques and beliefs around it. I know I'll never hit it all, but it feels like I've tried every flavor of manifestation, and I've really come to understand what seems to be fluff and hopeful and wishful thinking, and how it really does work psychologically, and practically as well. So we can get into all those different techniques, but I'd say that's where it really started. And just through trial and error and living it is how it's really come to be a practice and a belief system.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you went through that explanation because I don't know, maybe some listeners know this, but maybe they don't. But it's like, the Christians or Catholics or whatever religion you call it prayer, but that is manifestation, right? And it's like, oh, the witches call it manifestation. Or if you do witchcraft, that's you're doing not like it's not. It's literally all the same thing. So I love that you say that because I tell people that all the time. They're like, oh, I don't want to do like witchcraft or manifestation. I just pray. I'm like, well, whatever the hell you want to call it, right? It's the same thing. And I feel like people don't understand that because it's just their very like narrow mind or what society has told them like about religion or whatever. I mean, I'm a little bit different than you. I grew up in a very toxic, Catholic household, and it's like you have to do this. You can't. You're gonna die if you sin or like whatever. All that stupid shit. That's just used for control. So I love that. So
Yeah,
I
it's
want to talk about. I was going to say, so I'm excited because I want to talk about. I know I love astrology and tarot and all the other strategies that you said, but I want to hear your perspective on why you kind of ditch that stuff. Like, what is, because I'm very open minded. I would love to hear why you no longer use that.
well, first, I want to just honor the experience you had as a kid. I know that religion has traumatized many, many people.
Yeah.
And I'd say my trauma around religion didn't come from my family or my religion per se. It came from persecution. My mom is a Holocaust survivor. Both my parents are Jewish. So I grew up with that kind of confusion of not feeling like I fit into society. And I can't believe it, 2024, it feels like we're in 1930 Germany again, starting up. Like it's
Yeah.
just wild. So
Yeah.
if anything, I really feel like I'm reclaiming my Judaism today, but not from a religious perspective. And a lot of people who don't know Jews, it's very confusing to understand. It's also an ethno religion. It's not just a religious thing. It's also a culture. It's a ethnicity. It's so much more. So anyway, I
Right.
digress. Just on to that. A lot of people who come to me, a lot of people I work with today come from church hurt. And it's so common and it's so painful and it's so valid. And I think is one of the reasons people go to New Age spirituality is because they want to feel empowered. They want to feel safe. They want to feel like they're not being told what to do. And I think as somebody who grew up in a Jewish household where it wasn't forced down my throat, because Christianity can come off that way to people,
Yeah.
Judaism isn't that way. It's not a religion that they don't try to proselytize, they don't try to convert people. It's very much like how does the family want to function from that lens? And so for me, it was much more cultural, food, holidays. It wasn't around God. And so as an adolescent, as actually a young child and an adolescent, I was looking for God because nobody was telling me what God was. So I ended up in New Age spirituality trying to make sense of it because I had never been told anything about God. It was just a word I heard Christians use, really.
Yeah.
And when you go to a temple as a kid, it's in Hebrew. So you don't really create these neuroses around God because it's all just sounds to you
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're speaking.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm getting off topic. What was your question?
No, I mean, whatever is supposed to come through
Yeah.
yeah, I will just invite you with
Well,
whatever comes through. Yeah.
so yeah, I'm just feeling compelled to talk more about, oh, right. Your question was, I was going to say, I'm feeling more compelled to talk about what I feel God is, but your question was around tarot and astrology. So
Well, you can, if you want to, we can talk about what God, yeah, like, and
yeah,
then we
well,
can go back.
I'll
Yeah.
tie it on in.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that your question kind of spurred that, but I'm going to wrangle
Yeah.
my crazy brain right now and focus it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so for the audience, for your audience, I was a professional tarot card reader way back when, and it was one of the ways that I really started developing a way to channel my psychic gifts because I always had this intuition and was tapped in to energies and forces that no adults were informing me about. So it was a very isolating and confusing space to be. So tarot for me kind of centered me and got me focused on what is all this information that I'm getting and how can I make it coherent and productive. That's how I thought I was doing it. But what I saw was that clients were coming to me desperate. And that's honestly how I found tarot. I was feeling desperate. I wanted answers. I wanted guidance. I wanted to understand what was going on, and I wanted to know what was going to happen. Now, this is a toxic way of being, and it's a codependent way to function. But I was broken, and I mean, we're none of us are broken, but I was feeling broken,
Yeah.
and I was also feeling lost. And so, very quickly, as I was providing the service to others, I was able to see that mirror and recognize this isn't okay. I'm not serving these people the best way I can. And in essence, I'm draining myself. So, very quickly, I decided, all right, I know that predictions are real, but it's not productive for people. So if people are coming to me and I have this gift, how can I make it be a service? How can I actually make this healthy? So what I tried to do was explain to them, help them see their mindset. How did you get here? How come this is the prediction? And what do you want to come true? And what would your mindset and behavior look like to align you with that? So I tried to coach them to be more functional and healthy, but they were so desperate they couldn't hear me. So very quickly, I stopped offering tarot card readings and I thought astrology, that's more practical. It's more data driven. It's more precise and less ego driven from my perspective as well, because every tarot card reader is filtering through his or her lens. So it's not
Yeah.
completely accurate.
Yeah.
So I studied astrology for a few years. I became a professional astrologer. I was so good at it because I'm able to connect the dots. I was able to channel. It was very accurate, but still it felt like I was facilitating too much need from these people. And so I continued to say, yes, this is a prediction. Yes, this is data, but you have free will and you can really rise above it. As I was saying those words, I was unable to do the same because I was putting out horoscopes. And even though I wanted to say, I'm not connected to this, whatever you focus on grows. So I
Yeah.
was still being, manipulated or impacted by the general energies in the cosmos. And I realized that's not what God wants for us. And it's not it's not the healthiest and the most high way to thrive because we're still in our heads, we're still spreading our energy out, we're still nitpicking and trying to analyze and decipher everything and calculate our choices. So I decided through a suggestion of a Christian mentor, actually, to give up astrology for 30 days and see if life felt better, see if my manifestations were easier. And in like a week or two, I was just shocked. And I thought, what have I been doing? Now, it helped me understand myself more. It helped me refine my gifts as a public speaker. It helped me refine my gifts as a mentor. It provided a lot of value. But if I hadn't gone down those rabbit holes, I'm curious where I would be today. That's not productive to look back and have regrets, but I do try to support other people to not waste time with it and go straight for the gold. Who, like, what feels true to you? What are your goals? What would you like life to look like? And how do you align to that rather than how can we analyze and predict everything? And
Right.
so for me, it was really establishing a relationship to a singular God frequency and stop scattering my energy to all these other energies in the atmosphere, which I think New Age spirituality really fosters and promotes, and witchcraft in particular really keeps you locked into. It's a very self-focused practice that scatters your energy to unknown forces and can be quite dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna touch like on when you said what did you say? Um it was when you said that, you know, yeah, codependent for it's a very codependent relationship with tarot cards because I mean for me my experience that is true too because I used tarot cards to kind of stop going after like needing a real because I always say that my codependency came from like relationships. Like I use them as if I'm going to say my drug of choice was relationships, not kind of discounting anybody that actually deals with like actual like, you know, drugs or anything. But from my experience, what it did to my brain was the same thing that a drug would do to somebody else's brain, right? So it's just the different experience there. And then I since stopped. I still read tarot cards sometimes for people. I don't call myself a tarot reader. I don't even, usually if it's not a client, I'm not going to put out there that I'm doing readings, right? So, because I don't want to be looked at like that, and I'm not reading energy for that. If they want clarity and they don't want, I can give them a channel message on what some guidance, like a higher consciousness level that they're giving, you know, like that they can't hear for themselves. And then, of course, the tarot cards is the picture that they need to see because they may not believe me, you know, and that's okay. Like they don't need to believe me. So I do use it that way. Same thing with astrology. Like I love astrology, but I feel like you said, it's so scattered that, you know, I get my own, you know, direct messages that I, you know, just kind of follow. And I feel like when I do get those messages for other people, or if it's like Mercury retrograde, there's this whole negative connotation around, oh, your ex is going to come back and you're going to have this happen and that happen. But like sometimes, like I always say, what if not? Like, why don't, what if you don't want it to? Then it won't happen, right? So I love that you kind of shifted in the like going a different way and giving it like, you know, how can we fix your mindset? Because that's really all it is, right? So
And it really does act as a drug, right? Like I'm in a lot of Facebook networking groups and I cringe every time I see women say like, "Oh, can I have a reference for a psychic?" or "Who do you recommend for an astrology reading?" I remember, I know what that drive is. You are
yeah,
looking for answers outside of yourself and we're social beings, especially women. We
yeah,
need each other. But the essence of like looking for a reading, ugh, like it's
yeah,
just so needy and well, I mean, I cringe because that's part of me, like that have really worked hard to move on from.
yeah,
So there's no judgment there. I'm no better, but
yeah,
it feeds something that's not from a place of health and function. And so supporting people to trust their own clarity, their own guidance to make informed decisions, because so many people who are drawn to that had childhood trauma, don't trust themselves, have been told that they're not worthy of being able to make a decision. So supporting people to connect to God in a way that feels authentic and true to them, not the whatever the church told them God is, but have
right,
a source that they feel like rely on and in their privacy trust. And what does it look like to trust oneself? And what does it look like to actually have unwavering faith and make decisions with confidence that you're resilient? You can handle what comes next. You don't need to know.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I was going to say, I usually, the way that I teach, like, or the way that I kind of help people understand, like, what God is, like, we all have Christ consciousness within us. So it's like, that is, you know, and I do cringe the same time too. Like when people, my response usually, if I feel very called to respond or like help somebody in those groups or like a post, I usually say, ask yourself every single night. Usually I tell my clients this because I don't give answers to them. I help them understand how they can ask themselves or use their spirit guides, or I might connect into their spirit guides to kind of help them. But I usually, like, when people need business, like, when people need business help, I'm like, what did your business spirit guide say? And people are like, wait a second, I have business spirit guides. I'm like, yeah, of course you do. And then a couple days later, they're like, oh, they said to go do this. They said to go do that or stop doing that, like things like that. So it's like anybody can hear the messages. You don't have to be some guru and channeling, right? So it's like, you just have to ask yourself because ultimately you're the only one that knows. And I feel like if you're asking the question, you probably already know the answer. I mean, I know that for me, I would ask questions that I know the answer to. I just don't want to listen to it. I'd rather somebody else tell me or
Like,
clarify. Sometimes you just need clarity or like reassurance that sure, that is something that you should do, or that would be great. Another person saying that, maybe that's all you need, right? So yeah,
I
I
think
definitely understand.
there can be so much risk of mental illness tipping over the edge with these sorts of things. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't even, I mean, I myself, I won't try to connect to guides or angels or other spirits, because what I've seen is that when you start to play in those realms, you are opening yourself to unknown stuff. And it can show up in anxiety, depression, OCD, lack of
mhm,
self-trust, like all these things that society says is normal, that is just an energy leakage. So I yeah, I think it's just, it can get messy to start to name things that we don't actually know. And I was in the new age realm for so long and
yeah,
trying, third eye meditations and connect to your guides. And it's like, we don't actually know what those things are. And
right,
I feel like there's a price to pay. Like it does show up in bad luck or torment or crisis or people lashing out at us. And I've just found also that a lot of friendships ended when I started coming to these realizations, and people started behaving in ways I never thought that they'd behave.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to make any sort of broad sweeping statements, but a lot of my friends were astrologers and a lot of my friends were witches. And sometimes it was like, who are these people? Like they would be really loving and kind. And then all of a
yeah,
sudden, one day they'd be saying things. And I'm like, I don't even recognize you anymore. I'm like, right, because they're open portals. And I was an open portal. So
yeah.
the way I try to function these days is just trying to really stay in a very practical and grounded, healthy, functional space and continue to nurture my relationship to myself and to God. And things are just a lot simpler and they're a lot cleaner, it feels like.
Hmm. Yeah, I have a very similar. I was very into witchcraft and like, I'm very limited on when I do channel, and it's because like I can actually see the energy. So if like I don't if it makes my body feel like I have anxiety, like you said, I'm not going to go forward with that, even if it is to help somebody. Like, so I do have big boundaries with that, but I used to do a lot of that stuff too. So it's like I know what it does. Like I've gone through that. I feel like you said, bad luck. I had a lot of bad luck, or it would be tied up in my money or something like that. So I don't really do much of that anymore, but I feel like when people can trust and connect with themselves, you don't have to use like people outside or like spirit guides or whatever. You can just use yourself eventually. But I feel like people have to go through that, or they're going to constantly latch on to other people. Like, I need your
Yeah.
help. I need your help. Right. You kind of have to use like the universe or use some type of new age spirituality to kind of go through that yourself. So you don't go back, or you don't keep like leeching on to people needing somebody else. And I think
Yeah.
it was for me because I needed to learn that too, because I was constantly like, I need guidance. I need guidance. And it's just like, why don't I just ask myself? Right. So,
I love that. And a
yeah.
lot of the clients that come to me have been in therapy for years.
Yeah.
And my question is, what's wrong with your therapist that they're
Yeah.
okay continuing their own codependent relationship with you? Because I think there is this idea that we just are always needing to do work, always needing to unpeel the layers. And as you know, what we focus on grows. So if we're
Yes.
constantly trying to address trauma, constantly trying to address what's wrong
Yes.
with us, that's the reality we're creating. And it was my last coach a year ago who said, like, you don't need a coach. Like, you are healed. You've done the work. Let it go. And I
Right.
haven't had a coach since, and it's changed my practice. I've really like had a vision for each client. Let me be your last coach. If you want support, that's okay. We're allowed to have preferences. We're allowed to have support, but needing a coach or needing a therapist, something wasn't provided in those containers that you actually came into a healthy blueprint of yourself. And I think that that's also just a fragment of our culture, right? Like, our culture's
Yes.
broken, our society's broken, and people aren't raised to feel full and whole and complete and trust themselves. And I think religion is part of that trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, and I feel like when I have healed different traumas, or if I like, one of my, I've used Jesus, his higher self, to help me heal my relationship to, like, being able to channel him, because, I wanted to ask him. My main goal was to ask why he came here. What was, and his intention to come here was to be a human, to be a healer, but all of us here can be healers, right? So it's like, he's like, the way that you got, and it's actually really funny, and I've talked to so many other people about this too, that they're like, he's very funny about it. He's like, you humans think that you are supposed to worship me, and you're not, like that, but that is what Christianity teaches. So I use that too, because that really healed. It made sense of why I had so much trauma, and I'm like, I'm not even supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be doing my own path, my own mission. So, I feel like when people have to go through that, same thing with therapy. Therapy never worked for me, because I felt like, you kept telling me to do this, you kept telling me to do this, you give me this tool and it's not working. Like, it's like, where am I going wrong? Same thing with you. Like, when you said about your coach, I had the same thing, and I felt like my coach she kept me stuck because I had to keep paying her, and I realized it's not working, and I feel like I'm reliving my trauma again. And your main niche was, you don't have to relive your trauma, but you're making me relive it. Like, I feel it. Let me just feel it so I can move on. That's literally what I needed to do. And then I started doing it on my own, and I was like, okay, I don't need to keep revisiting this. I felt it. I released it. I honored it. Like, I accepted it. It's who I used to be, and it got me to be where I am now. Like, let's move on from that, right? Like, I have to let it go. Like, keep it inside of me, like, evolve it, not completely let it go, but use it as power versus keeping me stuck, right? So I love that. I
Yeah,
love
I'm
that
sorry.
we're having this conversation, because I'm like, okay, now it makes sense of why we connected.
Yeah. And I'm sorry you went through that. I also had a couple therapists, which, looking back on it, was quite abusive.
Yeah.
But hurt people hurt people. And
Right.
just, like, I had therapists like telling me to do candle magic and stuff. And that is ego driven. It's
Yes.
forceful.
Yeah.
It is not surrendered. It is not trusting. It is not faith. It's toxic. And I just look back to years ago where I thought witchcraft was like so empowering and so fun and so earth-based and so benevolent. And like, my throat just closes up as I'm saying that. Like,
Yeah.
it's sick.
I was gonna say,
It's,
my throat just kind of got a little itchy when you said
yeah,
that.
it's just like all these
Yeah.
women who think that they're reclaiming their power by being these sexual heathens online. And it's just like, you are so unaware of what you're doing to yourself right now.
Yes.
It's this pendulum swinging way too far.
Right.
And you don't have to be half naked to be empowered, and you don't need to be lighting candles to create the reality you want. You can just
Right.
be a person and have desires and walk with integrity and have faith, and it really isn't much more than that. And is there a level of healing required? Yes, but it's not this complex, deep, dark thing. And is there abuse to work through? Yes. Is there addiction to work through? Yes. But
Yes.
so much of the modalities are keeping people stuck and keeping people continually digging to the point where they never find their functional self, because they're constantly digging for it.
Yes. Yeah. And when you had said about, these women, the new age spirituality, I should say, and I think somebody that I used to do And that just kind of brings me back to a conversation that I used to do well, I still do network marketing here and there, but one of the girls, when she had said something, she said, what is human design? So I kind of told her about it. And I said, I lean more into human design because sure, it uses a lot of new age spirituality, and she was more of very Christian based. And she's like, well, I use my Bible. And I was like, whatever you want to use, like whatever, I don't care, whatever you want to use. I'm not the person. If you want to, if you want me to help you, I will explain human design, but it does not go by the Bible. So, it uses a whole bunch of ancient things, ancient, the I Ching, Kabbalah. It does use astrology, and I just said, it's basically your DNA. If you believe in science and quantum physics, that's, basically where it's coming into play. And I said, I feel like I personally, probably the last year, have leaned more into that because it's not so much of something, it's all inside of us. So, it's helping people understand themselves. It's not go use this, go use that, go do this. It's just how can you, because the three things that I help people do is trust themselves, have more self-confidence, and be able to stop asking other people outside of them. You don't need to, if you're supposed to make a decision this way because this is how you're designed, you won't need to ask anybody. So that's where I kind of shifted more into human design. And people are like, okay, so like I don't have to have anxiety over making a decision. I'm like, well, you might have to, there might be trauma that you have to work through, which is part of the journey. But no, you don't need to go pull tarot cards or go look at your, horoscope or worry about what the planets are doing because it doesn't matter, you know? So yeah, I love that we're having this conversation.
Me
Um,
too.
so what advice would you give somebody who is struggling to maybe find their spiritual path or the questioning their beliefs?
What would I suggest to them? I'd say first, stop flooding yourself with information. Stop going on YouTube, reading all the self-help books. Try to get back to a routine, eating well, drinking a lot of water, exercising, and taking action steps towards the goals you want to achieve. Try to limit all the noise because I think that we're so inundated with, social media feeds and all these spiritual ideas that we can't even hear ourselves think. So creating a safe and productive lifestyle so that you can actually hear yourself. I like to spend a lot of time walking in the woods. Just, I don't want to say silence because there's lots of noise in the woods and I end up talking out loud to myself, but space away from your devices, away from other people's voices is going to be really productive for you. I developed a program called the Faith Frequency Incubator, which is a small group coaching program with curriculum that offers a small video every day because I feel like we get so inundated with information. It's like 1 to 5 minute long videos that just offer a different way to tap into yourself and to tap into what you're perceiving. Because as you know, it's a skill and it's a muscle to build to hear your own inner voice, to recognize what is interference, what is light, what is other people's projections onto you, what is God. It takes practice, and only you can know that. No teacher, no coach can tell you what to believe or how to believe it. You have to go through an experience. So I do my best to give a very neutral, God focused, but religion void experience so that people can start to rebuild their trust in God, because even, there's a codependent relationship with God that can be built in religion. And I think that, people question, well, what is New Age spirituality? Because these are all ancient practices. Yes, that's true. None of it's new. What
Right.
is new is Westerners dabbling and picking these different tools and techniques, thinking that there's no recourse, that there's no, response that's going to ripple back to you with complete ignorance. So I think that choosing to either remove yourself from practices you know nothing about, or starting to study where it came from. And I think there's nothing wrong with the Bible, but are you reading the Bible? Are you just believing something your pastor said with no context? I think that we have to be careful with, I like blind faith, but blind belief, I think, can
Yeah.
be dangerous. And obviously there is something that came from these ancient traditions and
Right.
ancient cultures, also realizing that we have evolved as well. And I have no certain belief about anything. I know what I've experienced and what is resonating now, but I think anyone who's selling you certainty should be questioned. We are just human beings. There is no way that
Yeah.
I know the truth of the universe. I know from my lifetime what I've started to weed out, but we're just human beings and God knows so much more than we do.
Yeah.
I define God as a frequency.
Yeah.
People are like, well, so you think there's some guy controlling everything? No, I don't know. I don't know what God looks like. I know what
Yeah.
God feels like. I know I have an idea from my experience how God moves and how not God moves, which I know
Yeah.
very intimately.
Yeah.
So helping people to get familiar with the difference through trial and error, and then aligning with God much more frequently is going to be offering a much more productive and gentle and easeful life.
Yeah. I love that you said that God is a frequency because that's what I also believe too. To me, God is God. It's not like a person. Like, it's more of like if I'm looking at something or if I'm seeing something, it's just light. Like, it's not like, why do I feel like there's a shadow? Like, that's a little bit, that would be different. That would be something like imposing of maybe that frequency. And
Mhm.
most of the time, when people like, I believe the Bible is real. Like, I believe it was altered by a man. Like, I feel like it's very altered. Not everything, and like I feel like there could be like the Old Testament or whatever they talk about. I believe that a lot of that was real, but it was taken out to fit the narrative of whatever they need to fit the narrative of, like, I believe that, I don't know if you watch The Simpsons, but I believe that their predictions are always right for whatever reason. I'm like, that's interesting, because I loved watching The Simpsons and when I was a kid, and I used to always tell my mom, that's going to happen, that's going to happen. And it's like now on TikTok, it's like, oh, symptoms were, things happened. And it's like, wow, these things are, somebody knows what's happening, so obviously it's being facilitated, it's not God. Like, these are all man-made stuff that people just think are coincidences, and I'm like, no, I don't believe in coincidences. Like, they're just synchronicities of whatever is happening or whatever needs to happen to fit their narrative. So yeah, that's what I usually say to people, like, if they're like, well, this happened, a significant experience, I should say. And I'm like, well, you just have to experience that. I'm not the person that's going to tell you what you need to do, So yeah, I love that. So as we wrap up, can you share any like significance or specific experiences or moments that shaped your view of manifestation or spirituality lately that you'll be like moving forward in the future? Or maybe it could help people move forward in the future.
Interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is recognizing the essence of things. Like, I feel as though the quickest manifestations I've experienced is when I had an energetic awareness of it without language, and then it showed up really quickly, but it's not always the best for us. So I think being really careful to be locked into what you think you want, what you think is best for you. I always tell people not to make vision boards because it's so limiting, because you've already decided what it is that you want.
Yeah.
And then you're not opening yourself up to infinite possibility. So I just say question your own judgment. And if you're willing to build a relationship to God per se, knowing that you can rely on something else out there seeing more than you do, and keeping yourself in the orientation of receptivity to better than you can imagine. And I think that this need to control and need to hold on is a result of codependency, is a result of trauma. And to begin to untangle those tethers of control is going to be a real benefit to you. So when it comes to manifestation, it's almost like I have an idea of what I want. I have an idea of what I've experienced. I'm open to greater. Show me what's better than this, but making decisions in accordance and in integrity with what you feel is the most kind, loving, generative, healthy decision for you. And not to be in isolation either. I think a lot of YouTube manifestation teachers, social media manifestation teachers talk about you are the God of your reality. Everyone else, no one else has free will. I think that's a really dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Um, so recognizing you are part of a whole, and also recognizing your limited awareness, right? Not speaking to things with concrete decisions or beliefs if you don't know all aspects of that. And
Right.
and your question was like any pivotal experience recently. It is about something. I just remember once kind of invoking something, recognizing what was the feeling I had before that last experience, pulling that up within me, and then it showing up. And then I decided, oh, because it showed up, it was of benefit to me, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So just being really mindful step by step, not to be too impulsive. Just because something feels exciting doesn't necessarily mean it's for your best. So just to strengthen awareness about who you are, where you're functioning from, when you're making decisions from habits, when you're making decisions from a place of wisdom and learned experience, and when you're making decisions recklessly. And if you feel like that's not something that you can do on your own, hiring support until you do have those skills, because you can have those skills and life is much more fruitful, beneficial, enjoyable, productive with those skills.
I love that. And I'll make sure that people can get a hold of you through your website and all your, they'll be in the description box. And then also wherever you're listening to this, you'll also have her links in the show notes. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Laura.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast with Becca. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a review and then share with somebody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. Stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next week.